Marcus Romano sat in his empty penthouse, staring at the eviction notice in his trembling hands. 6 months ago, he controlled half of Chicago's underground. Tonight, he couldn't even pay his rent. The once mighty Mafia boss, who commanded respect from senators and feared criminals alike, was now just another broken man drowning in whiskey and regret. The sound of heels clicking against marble made him look up from his glass. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline glittered mockingly as a woman appeared in his doorway, tall, elegant, with skin like rich mahogany and eyes that held secrets he couldn't read. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying an authority that made his spine straighten. "It's been a long time." He squinted through the amber haze of alcohol. Something familiar stirred in his memory, but before he could place it, "Wait, I need to pause here for just a moment. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our dramatic tales of love and danger. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment below and let me know your city or country. Your engagement means everything to us, and those likes really help us bring you more captivating stories like this one. Now, back to Marcus and this mysterious woman. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Marcus struggled to focus, setting down his glass with unsteady hands. She stepped into the light and suddenly he saw it, the same determined chin, the same fearless gaze he remembered from years ago, but the scared 13-year-old who used to hide behind her mother's skirts had transformed into a woman who commanded every room she entered. "Sophia Williams," she said simply. "Elena's daughter." The words hit him like a physical blow. Elena, his family's housekeeper for 30 years, the woman who raised him when his own mother couldn't be bothered. She'd left with her daughter 15 years ago, right after Marcus took over the family business. "Sophia," he stood too quickly, the room spinning. "Little Sophia?" A smile ghosted across her lips. Not so little anymore. She wore a tailored business suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd conquered worlds he couldn't even imagine. This wasn't the girl who used to steal cookies from the kitchen while he taught her chess. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I heard about your situation." She moved closer, her heels clicking purposefully. "Lost territory, abandoned by allies, frozen accounts. They really did a number on you, didn't they?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "If you came here to gloat, I came here to help." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus Romano, who once made grown men weep with a single look, found himself speechless. "Help?" He laughed bitterly. "Sweetheart, I'm beyond help. The Romano Empire is finished." Sophia's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "That's where you're wrong, Marcus. You see, there are things about your father's empire, about your birthright, that you never knew. Things my mother kept safe all these years." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather envelope, sealed with wax that bore the Romano family crest. "What is that?" "Insurance," she said, holding his gaze. "Your father gave this to my mother the night before he died. He made her promise to keep it safe until you truly needed it." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. His father had died when he was 22, leaving him a vast but complicated inheritance. There had always been whispers about hidden assets, secret agreements, backup plans that never materialized. "And you think I need it now?" Sophia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Marcus, you're not just broke. You're marked for death. Vincent Torino has put a price on your head, and every two-bit gangster in the city is hunting you for the bounty." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of car doors slamming echoed from the street below. Marcus moved to the window and peered down to see black SUVs surrounding his building. "Looks like they found you," Sophia said calmly. But instead of fear, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a surge of the old fire, the predator awakening after a long sleep. Because Sophia Williams hadn't just walked back into his life, she'd brought hope, and Marcus Romano was about to remember why his enemies used to check under their beds for monsters. "2. How many?" Marcus asked, his voice transforming from broken drunk to calculating predator in seconds. Sophia moved to the window beside him, close enough that he caught her scent jasmine and steel. 8 men, maybe more, in the lobby. She glanced at his expensive suit, wrinkled and stained. "When's the last time you held a gun?" "Like riding a bike," he muttered, moving toward a hidden panel behind his bar. His hands were steady now, muscle memory overriding months of despair. "Marcus, wait!" Sophia caught his arm, her touch electric. "There's another way. I'm listening." She pulled out her phone and dialed. Detective Morrison, it's Sophia Williams. Yes, I'm fine. I need to report a breaking and entering in progress at the Millennium Tower. Penthouse level. Armed intruders. Approximately 8 men. Thank you. Marcus stared at her. You have the Chicago PD on speed dial? Among others, she said with that mysterious smile. I didn't spend 15 years just growing up, Marcus. I built a network. The sound of heavy footsteps in the stairwell grew louder. Marcus counted they'd disabled the elevators, smart, but they'd underestimated Sophia Williams. Who are you, really? He asked, studying her face in the dim light. I'm a corporate lawyer specializing in organized crime prosecution, she said matter-of-factly. Harvard Law, top of my class. I've been dismantling operations like Vincent Torino's for 3 years now. Marcus's world tilted. So you're a federal prosecutor. Consultant, she corrected. Very expensive, very discreet, very effective. The footsteps reached his floor. Marcus pulled Sophia behind the bar just as his front door exploded inward. 6 armed men poured through, weapons drawn, scanning the room with professional efficiency. Clear the bedroom, one commanded. Check the balcony. Sophia pressed closer to Marcus, her warmth burning through his shirt. She whispered against his ear, In 30 seconds, this place will be crawling with honest cops. Vincent's men will have to retreat or face federal charges. And then what? Then we disappear, and I show you what your father really left you. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The gunmen tensed, their leader barking orders into a radio. We've got incoming law enforcement. Abort and extract. They moved toward the windows, preparing to rappel down the building's exterior. But the leader paused, studying the room more carefully. Check behind the bar, he ordered. Marcus tensed, ready to fight, but Sophia remained perfectly calm. As the gunman rounded the corner, she stood gracefully and smiled. Officers, thank God you're here. The confused assassin found himself face to face with a woman who looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a death trap. Before he could react, the real police burst through the front door. Freeze, weapons down. In the chaos that followed, shouts, gunfire, bodies hitting the floor, Sophia grabbed Marcus's hand and led him toward a service panel he'd forgotten existed. They slipped into the building's maintenance corridor as police swarmed his penthouse. Emergency stairs, she said, guiding him through darkness. My car's in the underground garage. They descended in silence, Marcus's mind reeling. This woman, this incredible, dangerous woman, had just saved his life with nothing but a phone call and nerves of steel. Sophia, he said as they reached the garage level, why are you really helping me? She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. When she looked back, vulnerability flickered across her features for the first time. Because 15 years ago, you were the only person who ever treated me like I mattered, she said quietly. When every other Italian prince in that house looked through me like I was invisible. You saw me. You taught me chess. You made me believe I could be anything. Marcus remembered long afternoons in the library, a brilliant girl with hungry eyes absorbing everything he taught her about strategy, about power, about never accepting the hand you're dealt. You became everything, he said softly. I became what you showed me was possible. She opened the door. Now it's my turn to show you something. They emerged into the garage where a sleek black Porsche waited, but as Sophia moved toward the driver's seat, Marcus caught her hand. That envelope, he said. What's really in it? Her smile returned, mysterious and promising. Proof that Vincent Torino has been stealing from you for 20 years. Proof that your father's empire was twice the size anyone knew. And proof that you, Marcus Romano, are about to become the most dangerous man in Chicago again. She slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. But first, we need to disappear. Darhiwana 3. Sophia drove like she did everything else with absolute confidence and hidden depths. They wound through Chicago's industrial district, past shuttered factories and forgotten warehouses, while Marcus tried to process the night's revelations. Where are we going? He asked, watching her hands on the wheel. She'd removed her suit jacket, revealing toned arms that spoke of discipline and strength. Somewhere safe, somewhere they'll never think to look. She glanced at him. Tell me about Vincent Torino. Marcus leaned back, his head clearer than it had been in months. My father's lieutenant. Took over operations in the South Side after Dad died. I thought he was loyal. Loyalty is expensive, Sophia said. Vincent found a better offer. From who? That's the million-dollar question. She turned into an abandoned lot, but Marcus noticed the subtle security cameras, the reinforced fence, This place wasn't as deserted as it appeared. They stopped before a seemingly empty warehouse. Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at a text, then pressed something on her dashboard. A section of the warehouse wall slid open, revealing a hidden garage. "Welcome to my Chicago office," she said. Driving inside, the warehouse was immaculate polished concrete floors, state-of-the-art computers, legal documents organized with military precision. This wasn't just an office, it was a command center. "How long have you been planning this?" Marcus asked, following her to a conference table where she spread out the contents of the leather envelope. 3 years, she admitted. "Ever since I heard the Romano Empire was fracturing." The documents she revealed made Marcus's breath catch. Property deeds, bank records, contracts bearing his father's signature, all dated within months of the old man's death. "These properties," Marcus studied a map marked with red pins. "I never knew about them, because Vincent made sure you didn't." Sophia's finger traced a pattern across the city. "Your father was systematically buying up real estate through shell companies, warehouses, apartment buildings, commercial spaces. Vincent's been collecting rent on them for 20 years. Marcus calculated quickly. "That's millions in annual revenue. Try tens of millions." She pulled out a banking statement. "This account has been hidden under corporate layers so deep it would take federal investigators months to unravel. Vincent's been depositing your inheritance into it while telling you the family business was struggling." Rage built in Marcus's chest, not the desperate fury of a broken man, but the cold calculation of an apex predator. "He's been stealing from me since Dad died." "It gets worse." Sophia opened a laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Vincent's been using your father's name and reputation to expand into territories that never belonged to him. He's built an empire on your birthright." The screen showed a complex organizational chart. Torino's current operation was massive, tentacles reaching into construction, waste management, shipping. "All of this should be yours," Sophia said quietly. Marcus stood, pacing to the window where Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance. 6 months ago, he'd been drinking in an empty penthouse, beaten and forgotten. Now, "Why didn't your mother tell me about this years ago?" Sophia's voice carried old pain. "She tried. 2 months after my father died, she went to you with questions about irregularities in the books. Do you remember what you told her?" Marcus closed his eyes, shame washing over him. He'd been young, arrogant, grieving. "I told her to stay in her place and clean the kitchen. She never stopped caring about you." "Marcus, but she had a daughter to protect." Sophia's tone softened. "She made me promise never to contact you unless you truly needed saving." He turned back to face her. "And you think I need saving now?" "I think you need justice." She stood, moving closer. "I think you deserve what your father built for you. And I think Vincent Torino has underestimated who he's stolen from." There was something magnetic about her certainty, her fierce loyalty to a man who'd dismissed her family years ago. Marcus found himself studying her face, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence burning in her dark eyes. "This isn't just about money, is it?" he asked. "No." She met his gaze directly. "It's about power. It's about respect. It's about showing every person who ever looked down on us that they were wrong. Us." The word hung between them, charged with possibility. "What's your plan?" Marcus asked. Sophia's smile was sharp and beautiful. "We're going to take back everything that's yours, every building, every business, every dollar Vincent stole, and we're going to do it so thoroughly that he'll spend the rest of his life wondering how he underestimated Elena Williams' little girl." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hunger. Not for food or drink or escape, but for the game itself, for the chess match that separated kings from pawns. "When do we start?" "We already have." Sophia pulled out her phone, showing him a news alert. "Vincent Torino was just arrested in connection with tonight's raid on your penthouse. Attempted murder charges, conspiracy, weapons violations." Marcus stared at her. "You planned this." "I planned contingencies." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "I also planted evidence linking him to that gunfight. He'll be out on bail by tomorrow, but now he's vulnerable, distracted, making mistakes. And while he's dealing with legal problems, we'll be taking back your empire, piece by piece." Marcus reached out, catching her hand in his. Her skin was soft, but her grip was strong, the hands of someone who'd fought for everything she had. "Why are you risking this for me, Sophia?" For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her features. "Because you made me believe I was worth something, when the whole world said I wasn't." The air between them crackled with 15 years of separation, with shared history and impossible attraction. Marcus found himself stepping closer, drawn by her strength and the mystery of what she'd become. But before either could speak, her phone buzzed with an urgent alert. "What is it?" Marcus asked. Sophia's expression hardened. "Vincent made bail faster than expected. And he's not just coming for you anymore." She looked up, fear touching her eyes for the first time. "He's coming for me." "For? How long do we have?" Marcus asked, watching Sophia's fingers fly across her keyboard as she tracked Vincent's movements through a network of informants and surveillance feeds. "Maybe an hour. He's mobilizing everything: old crew, new connections, hired muscle from Detroit." She pulled up satellite imagery of the warehouse district. "He knows I'm the one who fed information to the police." Marcus moved behind her chair, studying the screen over her shoulder. Her jasmine scent mixed with the tension in the air. And he forced himself to focus on strategy instead of the curve of her neck. "We could run," he said. "Leave Chicago tonight." "Running isn't winning." Sophia spun the chair to face him, their knees almost touching. "Besides, I don't run. Ever." The fierce determination in her voice reminded him of why he'd been drawn to her even as a child. She'd never backed down from a challenge, never accepted limitations others tried to place on her. "Then we fight," Marcus said simply. "With what army?" "Vincent has 40 men. We have—" She gestured around the empty warehouse. "Us. Sometimes that's enough." Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't called in months. "I may have lost my territory, but I still have debts I can collect. Marcus, the people who abandoned you didn't abandon me. They abandoned a loser." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "But tonight, I'm not a loser anymore." He dialed the first number. "Tommy, it's Marcus Romano. I know what you heard, but reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I need you to remember who kept your brother out of prison. Good. Warehouse District, Pier 47, 1 hour." Sophia watched him work, making call after call. Each conversation was the same reminders of old favors, old loyalties, old debts. Marcus Romano might have fallen, but his memory was long and his understanding of human nature even longer. "How many?" Sophia asked after the last call. 12. Maybe 15 if some bring friends." Marcus sat on the table's edge. "Not enough for a war, but enough to make Vincent think twice." "It's not about the numbers," Sophia said thoughtfully. "It's about making Vincent react instead of act, force him into mistakes." "Exactly." Marcus studied her face in the blue glow of the computer screens. "You understand strategy. You taught me chess, remember? Control the center, protect your pieces, always think 3 moves ahead." The memory hit him with unexpected warmth long afternoons in his father's library, teaching a brilliant girl to see patterns others missed. She'd been 12 then, all sharp elbows and sharper questions. "You were my best student," he said quietly. "I had an excellent teacher." Her voice carried old affection, mixed with something deeper, more dangerous. A new alert chimed on her computer. "Vincent's moving. 2 convoys coming from different directions." Sophia pulled up a tactical display. "He's not just hunting us, he's trying to box us in." Marcus stood, the familiar rush of combat planning clearing his mind completely. "Then we don't stay boxed. Can you access the building's systems from here?" "Industrial controls. Lighting, security, I've got everything networked." Her hands moved across multiple keyboards like a concert pianist. "What do you need?" "Chaos." Marcus moved to the weapons locker he'd spotted earlier. Sophia had come prepared for war. "Vincent thinks he's hunting wounded prey. Let's show him he's walking into a predator's den." They worked in synchronized silence. Marcus checking weapons while Sophia programmed building systems. There was something intimate about preparing for battle together, trusting each other with their lives without question or hesitation. "Marcus," Sophia said suddenly, "if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does," she turned to face him fully. "I need you to know that coming back here, finding you again, it wasn't just about justice or money. It was about—" Car engines echoed in the distance, growing closer. Vincent's army was approaching. "Tell me after we survive this," Marcus said, checking his pistol's magazine. Sophia nodded, but something vulnerable flickered in her eyes before she turned back to her computers. "Lights are rigged to create confusion patterns. I can trigger lockdowns on individual sections. Control the fire suppression system." "Good. When they breach the perimeter, The warehouse's main door exploded inward with a flash of light and thunder. Vincent Torino strode through the smoke wearing a $5,000 suit and murder in his eyes. Behind him came a parade of armed men more than Sophia's intelligence had suggested. "Marcus Romano," Vincent called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Come out and die with dignity, and I'll make it quick." Marcus stepped into the light, hands empty but posture radiating the authority he'd been born to wield. "Hello, Vincent. You look good for a dead man walking." Vincent's laugh was ugly. "You always were arrogant, even when you're beaten." "Beaten?" Marcus smiled. "I'm just getting started." On cue, the warehouse's lighting system triggered Sophia's programmed chaos, strobing lights, sudden darkness, emergency floods that turned the space into a disorienting maze of shadows and blinding glare. Vincent's men scattered, training taking over as they sought cover and tried to re-establish visual contact with their targets. "Now," Marcus whispered. Sophia triggered the fire suppression system, flooding the warehouse with thick foam that turned the floor treacherous and visibility nearly zero. In the confusion, Marcus moved like the predator he'd always been: silent, deadly, inevitable. This was his element, the dance of violence and strategy that had made his father's name legend. But as he closed in on Vincent's position, a single thought burned through his tactical focus. Somewhere in this chaos was the woman who'd given him back his future, and he would die before he let anyone take her away again. 5. The foam-filled warehouse had become a surreal battlefield, where shadows moved like deadly ghosts. Marcus used the chaos to his advantage, 15 years of combat experience guiding him through the confusion with predatory grace. Through the chemical fog, he heard Vincent's voice barking orders. "Find them! They can't have gone far." Marcus smiled grimly. Vincent was thinking like a street thug, not a strategist. The man had always been brilliant at following orders, but had never learned to adapt when the plan fell apart. A gunshot echoed through the space, then another. Marcus's blood chilled. Was Sophia safe? He'd lost visual contact with her when the suppression system activated. Moving toward the sound, he found one of Vincent's men stumbling through the foam, weapon drawn, but firing blind. Marcus approached from behind, silent as death itself. "Looking for someone," Marcus whispered. The man spun, but Marcus was already inside his guard. A quick strike to the throat, a practiced movement to disarm the gunman, dropped without firing another shot. "One down," Marcus murmured into the wireless earpiece Sophia had given him. "I count 4 more on the east side," came her voice, calm and professional despite the danger. "Tommy's boys just arrived. They're coming in through the south entrance." Relief flooded through him. She was alive and still coordinating their defense from her mobile command post. The warehouse's acoustics carried Vincent's increasingly frustrated commands as his organized assault dissolved into chaos. His men were stumbling into each other, shooting at shadows, completely disoriented by Sophia's technological warfare. "This is embarrassing," Marcus said into his mic as he disabled another attacker. "Vincent brought 40 men to lose a fight with 2. "Don't get cocky," Sophia warned. "He's regrouping near the main entrance." "And Marcus, he's got something in his hand, something that looks like—" Her transmission cut off with the sharp crack of gunfire. Marcus's world went cold. "Sophia? Sophia, respond." Silence. Every rational thought disappeared, replaced by pure, primal fury. Marcus Romano, the man who'd once controlled Chicago's underworld through cold calculation, became something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose. He moved through the warehouse like a force of nature, no longer bothering with stealth. When Vincent's men appeared through the chemical fog, Marcus engaged them directly, his pistol speaking with deadly precision. Near the warehouse's computer setup, he found signs of a struggle: an overturned chair, Sophia's jacket torn and abandoned, but no blood and no body. "Vincent," Marcus's voice echoed through the space with raw authority, "end this. Your fight is with me." "Actually," Vincent's voice came from the warehouse's upper level, amplified through speakers, "my fight is with everyone who thinks they can challenge me, including your little lawyer friend." Marcus looked up to see Vincent on the administrative platform, holding Sophia with a gun to her head. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the defiance burning in her eyes. "She's quite beautiful," Vincent continued conversationally. "Eleanor's daughter, all grown up. Shame she inherited her mother's poor judgment about loyalty." "Let her go," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between us." "Oh, I will. After you watch her die. After you understand the price of defying Vincent Torino." Marcus felt the familiar ice-cold calculation settle over him, the same ruthless clarity that had made his father's name legend. Vincent had just made the fatal mistake of threatening what Marcus cared about. "Vincent," Marcus called out, stepping into the open where the man could see him clearly. "Before you kill her, don't you want to know what was in those documents?" He could see Vincent hesitate. Greed and curiosity, the man's greatest weaknesses. "What documents?" "The ones your father really left me." Marcus reached into his jacket, moving slowly. "The ones that prove you've been stealing from the Romano family for 20 years. "I know about your father's hidden assets," Vincent sneered. "I've been collecting on them since he died." "No," Marcus smiled coldly. "You've been collecting on the ones he wanted you to find, the decoy accounts." He pulled out a different envelope one Sophia had given him from her private files. "These documents detail the real inheritance, the legitimate Romano empire your father built through legal businesses, investment portfolios, political connections, assets worth 10 times what you've been stealing." Vincent's grip on Sophia loosened slightly as his attention focused on Marcus. The man couldn't help himself. The promise of greater wealth had always been his weakness. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Marcus opened the envelope, revealing corporate letterhead and official seals. "Shipping companies in Los Angeles, construction firms in Miami, technology investments in Silicon Valley, all legally acquired, all legitimately profitable, all rightfully mine." Sophia caught Marcus's eye for just a moment. Her slight nod told him she understood his play. "The irony," Marcus continued, "is that while you've been building a criminal empire that law enforcement can dismantle, I'll be inheriting businesses they can't touch. Legal power, Vincent, the kind that lasts." "Show me," Vincent demanded, his gun wavering slightly. "Come down here and see for yourself." It was a gamble appeal to Vincent's greed, while positioning him for a tactical disadvantage. But Marcus had been reading people's weaknesses since he was old enough to walk. Vincent began moving toward the stairs, dragging Sophia with him, his attention split between the documents in Marcus's hands and maintaining control of his hostage. It was exactly the opening Marcus had been waiting for. As they reached the main floor, Marcus made eye contact with Sophia once more. After 15 years apart, they still communicated without words, just like those long-ago chess games where they'd developed their own silent language. Sophia suddenly went limp, becoming dead weight in Vincent's arms. As he struggled to maintain his grip, she drove her elbow back into his ribs with precision that spoke of serious self-defense training. Vincent's gun arm swung wide, and Marcus moved. The next few seconds unfolded with brutal efficiency that reminded everyone present why Marcus Romano's name once commanded respect from coast to coast. When the smoke cleared, Vincent Torino was on his knees, defeated and disarmed, while Marcus stood over him with the cold satisfaction of a man who'd just taken back his birthright. Door 6. "That was incredibly stupid," Sophia said, checking the bruises on her wrists where Vincent's grip had left marks. Despite her words, her eyes held admiration for Marcus's calculated risk. "Incredibly effective," Marcus corrected, zip-tying Vincent's hands behind his back. Around them, Tommy and his crew were systematically disarming Vincent's scattered soldiers. "Sometimes the best strategy is making your opponent think they're winning." Vincent glared up at them with impotent rage. "This isn't over, Romano. I have connections you can't imagine, protection you can't touch." "Had," Sophia said pleasantly, scrolling through her tablet. "Past tense. Your federal protection just evaporated when Detective Morrison linked you to tonight's weapons charges. Turns out your FBI handler has some ethics after all." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "FBI handler?" "Vincent's been feeding information to federal agents for 3 years, Sophia explained. "Insurance policy. Unfortunately for him, attempted murder of a federal prosecutor tends to void those agreements." "You're federal?" Marcus stared at her. "Consultant," she corrected with a small smile. "Very expensive, very discreet, remember?" Marcus shook his head, still processing. This woman had more layers than a Russian doll. Every time he thought he understood her, she revealed another level of complexity. "Tommy," Marcus called to his lieutenant, "take Vincent and his boys somewhere quiet. Ask them politely about my father's stolen assets. I want account numbers, property deeds, business registrations, everything." "My pleasure, boss." Tommy's grin was unpleasant. He'd been waiting months for this moment. As Vincent was dragged away, his threats echoing through the warehouse, Marcus turned to find Sophia watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "What?" You just gave orders like you never lost power at all, she said quietly. Like you were born to command. I was. Marcus moved closer, studying her face in the warehouse's harsh lighting. But I forgot that for a while. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for saving my life. They stood in the sudden silence. The danger passed, but electricity still crackling between them. Marcus found himself noticing details he'd missed in the chaos, how her breath had quickened during the fight, how she'd never shown fear even with a gun to her head, how she looked at him now with something deeper than professional respect. Sophia, he began, then stopped. What did you say to the woman who'd given you back your life? She stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Marcus, when Vincent had that gun on me, all I could think about was how stupid I'd been to wait 15 years to come back. You had a life to build. Though career, I had regrets to nurse and what-ifs to collect. Her hand touched his chest over his heart. Do you know what my biggest regret was? Marcus couldn't breathe. Tell me. I regretted never knowing if that 13-year-old girl's crush on her teacher was as mutual as it felt. The words hung between them, like a confession and a challenge. Marcus remembered those afternoons differently now, not just teaching chess to a precocious child, but the moment he'd realized she was becoming someone extraordinary. The exact day he'd started looking forward to their sessions, for reasons that had nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with the way she listened to him like his words mattered. Sophia, he said carefully, you were 13. I'm not 13 anymore. Her hand moved to his face, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Marcus caught her wrist, but didn't pull her hand away. You're sure about this? He asked. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to being just... She silenced him with a kiss that answered every question he'd been afraid to ask. 15 years of separation, of wondering of what might have been dissolved into the certainty of right now. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I've been sure since I walked into your penthouse tonight, she whispered against his lips. The only question is whether you're brave enough to let yourself have something good. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw his future, not the empire he'd lost, but the kingdom they could build together. She was brilliant, dangerous, beautiful, and somehow impossibly she was here, with him. I'm learning, he said, then kissed her again. This time they didn't stop. When Tommy returned an hour later with a detailed list of Vincent's stolen assets and hidden accounts, he found Marcus and Sophia bent over her computer, planning their next move with the focused intensity of generals preparing for war. Vincent's singing like Sinatra, Tommy reported. Bank accounts in the Caymans, properties in 12 states, legitimate businesses he's been skimming from. The man kept records of everything. Good, Marcus said without looking up from the screen. File claims on all of it, legal challenges to every property, forensic audits of every business. I want Vincent's entire empire dissected down to the last nickel. That'll take months, Tommy warned. We have time, Sophia said, glancing at Marcus with a smile that held private promises. And we have resources Vincent never imagined. Speaking of resources, Marcus said, I need you to reach out to the Benedetti family in New York. Tell them Marcus Romano is back in business and looking to re-establish old alliances. Tommy's eyebrows rose. Boss, the Benedettis haven't spoken to us since I was weak, Marcus finished. But that was yesterday. Today I have something they want. Which is? Marcus looked at Sophia, who was already pulling up files on her screen. Corporate documents, partnership agreements, business ventures that spanned multiple states and legitimate industries. A way to go completely legal without losing any power, Marcus said. Vincent was small-time, thinking like a street thug, but my father was building something bigger, something that could last generations. Sophia's smile was proud and sharp. Welcome back, Marcus Romano. As dawn broke over Chicago, painting the warehouse windows gold, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, not just hope, but certainty. He wasn't just reclaiming his father's empire. He was building something better, and he wasn't building it alone. 7. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the penthouse office of Romano Industries, a legitimate corporation that existed only in carefully crafted legal documents until Sophia had made it real with a combination of recovered assets and strategic investments. The Benedetti meeting is confirmed for tomorrow, Sophia said, entering with coffee and a tablet full of updates. She wore a navy business suit that was both professional and devastating, and Marcus still felt that jolt of attraction every time she walked into a room. Any word from Vincent's trial preparation? He asked, accepting the coffee and resisting the urge to pull her into his lap. They'd agreed to keep business and pleasure separated during work hours, a rule they broke more often than they kept. Federal prosecutor is building a RICO case that should put him away for 20 years minimum. Sophia perched on the edge of his desk. The evidence from his own records is damning. Good. Marcus had no sympathy for the man who'd stolen his birthright and threatened the woman he loved. Yes, loved. The realization had hit him last week when he'd watched Sophia negotiate a hostile takeover with the ruthless efficiency of a chess grandmaster. She'd transformed from the girl who'd stolen his cookies to the woman who'd stolen his heart and his respect. "There's something else," Sophia said, her tone shifting to something more cautious. "I've been monitoring federal communications about our activities." Marcus's attention sharpened. "And? They're watching us. Not suspiciously, but interested. A corporate empire rising this quickly from organized crime ashes makes people curious." "Let them watch," Marcus said. "Everything we're doing is legal." "Technically legal," Sophia corrected. "But when you're leveraging political connections your father cultivated through less legitimate means, the line gets blurry." She was right, of course. The transition from criminal organization to legitimate business empire required navigating gray areas that could become legal problems if scrutinized too closely. "What do you recommend?" "We need an insurance policy. Someone with federal connections who can vouch for our legitimacy." Sophia's smile turned mischievous. "Fortunately, I know someone." Before Marcus could ask who, the office door burst open without warning. Tommy rushed in, his face pale with urgency. "Boss, we have a problem. 3 black SUVs just pulled up downstairs. Federal plates." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "How many agents?" "Looks like a full tactical team." Sophia was already moving, her fingers flying over her phone. "I'm checking federal warrant databases. Marcus, there's no paper trail for this. No warrants. No official operation. That was worse than an arrest. Unofficial federal interest meant someone was operating off the books, which meant they were dangerous and unpredictable." "Could be Vincent's federal handler," Marcus said, moving toward the window to observe the scene below, "cleaning up loose ends." "Or someone who wants our business for themselves," Sophia added grimly. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus watched federal agents deploy with military precision. These weren't investigators, they were soldiers. "Tommy, is the building secure?" "Private security, controlled access, but nothing that would stop federal agents with proper authority." "Which they may not have," Sophia pointed out. "If this is an off-books operation..." The lights went out, emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing the office in red illumination that turned the space into something from a nightmare. Through the windows, Marcus could see that the power outage affected the entire block. "That's not federal standard procedure," he said. "No," Sophia agreed, her voice tight with tension. "That's assassination protocol." Marcus felt the familiar ice-cold clarity of combat situations. Someone wanted him dead, and was using federal cover to do it. The question was who had that kind of reach and resources. "We're leaving," he decided. "Emergency exit? Service elevator to the parking garage," Tommy said. "But if they're professionals, they'll have it covered," Marcus finished. "Sophia, how many escape routes did you plan when you chose this building?" Her smile was sharp despite the danger. 3, plus 2 backup plans and a contingency I hope we never need. I love the way your mind works." "Save the romance for later," she said, leading them toward a section of wall that looked solid but opened at her touch. "Right now we run." The hidden passage led through the building's infrastructure ventilation shafts, maintenance corridors, spaces that existed between the official blueprints. Sophia had clearly spent considerable time preparing for exactly this scenario. "Where does this lead?" Marcus asked as they crawled through a horizontal shaft. "Neighboring building. I have a safe house 3 blocks away. And if that's compromised, then we use the contingency I hoped we'd never need." They emerged into a maintenance room in the adjacent building, dusty and forgotten. Sophia led them to a service exit that opened onto an alley where a nondescript sedan waited with keys hidden in a magnetic box under the rear bumper. "So you think of everything," Marcus said admiringly. "I learned from the best teacher." She started the engine. "You always said to think 3 moves ahead." As they drove through Chicago's pre-dawn streets, Marcus processed the night's events. Someone with federal resources wanted him dead. The legitimate empire he was building had attracted the wrong kind of attention. "Sophia," he said as they pulled into a residential garage, "that insurance policy you mentioned, how fast can you contact them?" Already did. She held up her phone, showing a text thread with someone identified only as DC Contact. We have a meeting in 6 hours. With who? Someone who outranks whoever just tried to kill us. Her smile was confident, but strained. Marcus, whatever happens next, I need you to know. Don't, he interrupted. Don't talk like we might not survive this. I'm not talking about survival. She turned to face him fully. I'm talking about consequences. What I'm about to do will change everything. Once we cross this line, there's no going back to the life we've been building. Marcus studied her face in the garage's dim lighting. Once again, she was 3 moves ahead of him. What aren't you telling me, Sophia? Her answer made his blood run cold. That federal team wasn't there to arrest you. They were there to recruit you. And the person behind it is someone we both know. 8. The safe house was a modest apartment in Lincoln Park that looked like it belonged to a graduate student, cramped, cluttered with legal books and completely unremarkable. Exactly the kind of place federal agents would overlook. Recruit me for what? Marcus asked, as Sophia activated multiple security systems that definitely didn't belong to any graduate student. A task force that officially doesn't exist, she said, checking monitors that showed feeds from cameras positioned throughout the neighborhood. Organized crime families who've successfully transitioned to legitimate businesses. The government wants to study you. Study me or control me? Both. Sophia moved to a wall safe hidden behind a bookshelf. The person behind this has been tracking your family for 20 years, someone who knew your father very well. She withdrew files that made Marcus's stomach clench: surveillance photos, financial records, detailed family histories going back 3 generations. The Romano family's entire existence had been documented with obsessive thoroughness. Who? He demanded. Before Sophia could answer, her phone buzzed with an encrypted call. She glanced at the screen, tension radiating from every line of her body. It's him, she said quietly. We can refuse to answer. No. Marcus had spent months running from problems. Tonight, he'd face them. Answer it. Sophia activated the speaker, and a voice Marcus hadn't heard in 15 years filled the room, cultured, intelligent, and carrying the weight of absolute authority. Hello, Marcus. You've been quite busy lately. Marcus felt his world tilt. Uncle Robert. Robert Castellano, his father's oldest friend, his godfather, the man who'd disappeared from Marcus's life the day his father was buried, the man who'd supposedly retired from the family business to pursue legitimate interests. You sound surprised, Robert said with dark amusement. Did you think I'd stopped watching over you? That I'd forgotten my promise to your father? You abandoned me, Marcus said, old hurt sharpening his voice. When I needed guidance, I gave you space to find your own path. Unfortunately, you chose poorly. Robert's tone turned cold. You let Vincent steal from you for 20 years. You let personal weakness destroy everything your father built. And now you want to fix it? Now I want to offer you a choice. The line went quiet for a moment. Miss Williams, I assume you're listening. Your mother spoke of you often before she died. Sophia went rigid. My mother died 3 months ago. Natural causes. Natural causes facilitated by stress over her daughter's dangerous career choices, Robert corrected. Elena was quite concerned about your involvement with federal prosecutions. She feared you were putting yourself at risk. Marcus watched Sophia's face go pale. You killed her mother. I eased an old woman's suffering while ensuring her daughter would eventually return to fulfill her purpose. Robert's voice carried no emotion. Elena understood that Sophia was always meant to guide you back to your birthright. The room felt airless. Marcus stared at Sophia, seeing pieces fall into place: her perfect timing, her extensive preparation, her knowledge of systems and procedures that went beyond what any lawyer should know. How long? Marcus asked quietly. How long have you been working for him? I've never worked for him, Sophia said firmly, but her voice carried guilt. But he's been watching, providing information, resources. She didn't know about the larger plan, Robert said almost kindly. Sophia believed she was acting independently when she came to find you. But her mother's death, the timing of Vincent's vulnerabilities, your perfect fall from grace, all carefully orchestrated. Marcus felt betrayal burn through him like acid. You manipulated everything. I guided events toward their natural conclusion, Robert corrected. You and Sophia were always meant to be together. Your father saw it when she was just a child, her intelligence, her loyalty, her potential to be your perfect partner in rebuilding the Romano Empire. My father's been dead for 20 years. Your father left very specific instructions about your education in leadership, instructions that included allowing you to fail completely so you'd appreciate success when it was offered. Robert's laugh was cold. Did you think Vincent's betrayal was accidental? That his federal protection appeared randomly? I've been managing your enemies since you were 22 years old. Sophia moved closer to Marcus, her hand finding his. Marcus, whatever his plan was, what we have is real. What we've built together is built on lies, Marcus finished, pulling away from her touch. Is built on love, she corrected fiercely. I don't care what he planned or orchestrated. I came back for you. I chose you. After he killed your mother to motivate you. Robert's voice cut through their argument. Enough. You have bigger concerns than hurt feelings. The federal team that visited you tonight wasn't acting on my orders. Someone else wants to control the Romano Empire, and they're willing to kill both of you to get it. Marcus's tactical mind overrode his emotional chaos. Who? Vincent had federal protection, but not from the FBI. Someone in the CIA has been using organized crime families to fund off-books operations. Your transition to legitimate business threatens their cash flow. So they want us dead. They want you compliant. Dead is easier than negotiation, but they'll accept controlled if you're willing to play along. Marcus looked at Sophia, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They were trapped between two manipulative forces, Robert's long-term chess game and a CIA operation that viewed them as expendable assets. What do you want from us? Marcus asked. I want you to complete your father's vision. Legitimate power that can't be touched by law enforcement or rival families. But I also want you alive, which means dealing with our CIA problem. How? By giving them what they think they want. Sophia has maintained federal connections throughout her career. She's been cultivating relationships with people who can provide protection from off-books operations. Marcus turned to stare at Sophia. More manipulation? No, she said quietly. Insurance. I knew this day would come when we'd need protection from people who see us as threats or assets, rather than human beings. She moved to her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. I've been building a file. Documentation of CIA involvement in organized crime funding, names and operations. Enough evidence to destroy careers and end programs. Mutually assured destruction, Marcus realized. The only language these people understand. Sophia's smile was sharp as broken glass. We give them a choice: leave us alone, or face congressional investigations that will end their careers and possibly their freedom. Marcus felt reluctantly impressed despite his anger. Even manipulated and betrayed, Sophia had been thinking ahead, preparing for battles he hadn't imagined. Robert's voice returned. Miss Williams has learned well, but documentation only works if you survive to use it, which brings us back to tonight's immediate problem. Through the apartment's windows, the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky. Marcus realized they'd been hiding for hours, while their enemies planned their next move. They're coming, Sophia said, checking her security monitors. 3 vehicles, federal plates. Marcus felt the familiar ice-cold calculations settle over him. Betrayed, manipulated, used but still alive, and still fighting. Then we end this, he said. Tonight. Doris. 9. The rooftop, Sophia said. Already moving toward emergency gear she'd strategically placed throughout the apartment. Extraction helicopter will be here in 10 minutes. Whose helicopter? Marcus demanded, following her up narrow stairs that led to roof access. Someone who owes me a very large favor, she said grimly, and someone who wants to see the CIA's off-books programs shut down as much as we do. They emerged onto the building's roof, just as black SUVs surrounded the block below. Through binoculars, Marcus counted at least 20 agents deploying with tactical precision. Professional, he admitted grudgingly, but predictable. They're not here to arrest us, Sophia said, setting up a radio with encryption protocols that looked military-grade. They're here to make us disappear. The radio crackled to life. Phoenix, this is Eagle. Package secure? Eagle, Phoenix, 2 packages ready for extraction. Hot zone, federal interference. Copy, Phoenix. Inbound ETA, 6 minutes. Marcus stared at Sophia. Phoenix. Operational code name, she said without meeting his eyes. Marcus, there are things about my federal consulting work that I couldn't tell you. More lies? More truths you weren't ready to hear? She turned to face him fully. I've been investigating CIA involvement in organized crime for 3 years. Not as a federal prosecutor, as an intelligence asset for people who want to clean house. The sound of rotors filled the air, still distant but approaching fast. Below, federal agents had breached the building and were moving systematically through each floor. Intelligence asset for who? Congressional Oversight Committee with classified authority. Sophia's voice carried old pain. When my mother started asking questions about irregularities in your father's accounts, she wasn't just being curious. She'd found evidence of CIA money being laundered through Romano family businesses. Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle snap into place. That's why she left. That's why Robert arranged for her to leave. She was getting too close to operations that could have gotten her killed. Sophia checked her watch. Eagle's 3 minutes out. And you knew all this when you came back to me? I knew some of it. I learned the rest when Robert made contact after Vincent's arrest. Sophia moved closer, her voice urgent. Marcus, whatever you think about the manipulation and the planning, what happened between us is real. What we've built together is real. The helicopter was visible now. A sleek black aircraft that definitely wasn't civilian. Federal agents on the street were shouting orders and pointing skyward. They're going to try to stop the extraction, Marcus observed. Let them try. Sophia's smile was sharp. Eagle team has congressional authorization. Anyone who interferes with this operation will face federal charges. The helicopter settled onto the rooftop with military precision. 2 figures in tactical gear emerged, a woman with silver hair and a man whose face Marcus recognized from newspaper photos. Congressman Davies. Marcus stared at the politician who'd been investigating CIA overreach for the past 5 years. Mr. Romano, Miss Williams. Davies had to shout over the rotor noise. We need to move. Senate hearing starts in 4 hours. Senate hearing? On unauthorized CIA operations funding through organized crime families, the silver-haired woman explained. She wore the kind of authority that suggested very high government clearance. Your testimony will shut down a program that's been operating illegally for 20 years. Marcus looked at Sophia as they climbed into the helicopter. You planned this. I planned to bring down the people who killed my mother and manipulated our lives, she corrected. Everything else us, what we've become that was never part of any plan. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus watched Chicago shrink beneath them. The federal agents below were powerless to stop an extraction authorized by congressional oversight. For the first time in months, he felt like he held the winning hand. The evidence? Davies asked once they were airborne. Sophia handed him a secure tablet. Financial records, communication intercepts, operational documents. Everything needed to prove CIA involvement in Romano family businesses dating back to Marcus's father. Davies scrolled through files, his expression growing grimmer. This is bigger than we thought. They weren't just using your family for money laundering. They were using the Romano network to move assets and personnel for operations that Congress never authorized. How many families? Marcus asked. At least 12 major organizations across the country. The silver-haired woman whom Marcus now recognized as Senator Patricia Hayes from the Intelligence Committee replied. Your transition to legitimate business threatened their entire operational structure. So they decided to eliminate us, Sophia said. They decided to bring you back under control, Hayes corrected. Elimination was Plan B. Marcus studied the landscape below federal buildings, monuments, the machinery of legitimate power that his father had always viewed as either obstacle or opportunity. What happens after the testimony? He asked. Depends on how much you want revenge, Davies said bluntly. We can protect you, give you immunity, let you disappear into witness protection. Or? Sophia prompted. Or you help us roll up the entire network, become assets for congressional oversight instead of CIA operations. Hayes's smile was calculating. Use your father's empire the way it was always meant to be used, as a bridge between legitimate and illegitimate power, but serving elected government instead of shadow operations. Marcus looked at Sophia, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They'd been manipulated by Robert, threatened by the CIA, and now recruited by Congress. Everyone wanted to use the Romano Empire for their own purposes, but this time they held the cards. What kind of deal are you offering? Marcus asked. Full pardons for past activities, congressional protection from retaliation, and legitimate government contracts worth more than your father's criminal empire ever generated, Davies said. In exchange, you help us shut down unauthorized operations and transition other crime families to legitimate businesses. Under government oversight, Sophia added. Under congressional oversight, Hayes corrected. There's a difference. The helicopter was approaching downtown Washington, where the machinery of American power waited to either crush them or crown them. Marcus made his decision with the same cold calculation his father had taught him. Senator, Congressman, you have a deal, but we negotiate the terms. Naturally, Hayes said with approval. Your father's son, after all. As they descended toward the Capitol, Marcus felt the pieces of his new empire falling into place. Not the criminal organization his father had built, not the legitimate businesses he'd been creating, but something entirely new, power exercised in the light instead of the shadows. And beside him, Sophia Williams squeezed his hand with the strength of someone who'd fought beside him and chosen him, despite every manipulation and betrayal. Together they were about to transform the definition of power itself. 10. The Senate hearing room was smaller than Marcus had expected, filled with cameras and congresspeople whose faces he recognized from years of political coverage. He sat at the witness table beside Sophia, both of them wearing business attire that projected competence and respectability. For the past 3 hours, they'd been methodically dismantling 20 years of unauthorized CIA operations, using Sophia's evidence to paint a picture of systemic abuse that had the committee members looking increasingly grim. Mr. Romano, Senator Hayes said, leaning forward, you're testifying that your father's organization was essentially a front for intelligence operations that Congress never authorized? Not initially, Marcus replied carefully, but over time, yes. CIA operatives approached my father with consulting contracts that were really money laundering operations. And when you inherited the family business, I inherited the legitimate assets and the illegitimate obligations. Marcus's voice carried careful emotion. I thought Vincent Torino was stealing from me. In reality, he was continuing unauthorized operations that my father had tried to end. Sophia leaned toward her microphone. The evidence shows that Mr. Romano's father was planning to transition completely to legitimate business when he died. His death may not have been the accident it appeared to be. A murmur went through the room. This was new information, not in their prepared testimony. Miss Williams, Congressman Davies said sharply, are you suggesting assassination? I'm suggesting that people who benefit from illegal operations have historically been willing to eliminate threats to those operations. Sophia's voice was steady as steel. The Romano family's transition to legitimate business threatened a revenue stream worth hundreds of millions annually. Marcus watched the committee members process this implication. They'd come expecting to investigate CIA overreach. Now they were confronting the possibility of murder. Do you have evidence supporting this theory? Senator Hayes asked. We have questions that deserve investigation, Sophia replied diplomatically. Behind them in the gallery, Marcus spotted a familiar figure, Robert Castellano, watching the proceedings with the satisfied expression of someone whose long-term plan was coming to fruition. Mr. Romano, another senator, spoke up. What are your intentions now? Will you continue operating your father's businesses? I intend to honor my father's original vision, Marcus said, looking directly at the cameras. Legitimate businesses that contribute to American economic growth while maintaining the organizational expertise that made my family successful. Under government oversight, Davies pressed. Under congressional oversight, Marcus corrected, using the language Hayes had taught him, with transparency and accountability that ensures our operations serve American interests. It was a careful dance, promising cooperation while maintaining independence, offering transparency while preserving operational security.